Hi, this is Dirk with Motorcycle Daily, and I've been riding Kawasaki's brand new 2012 ZX-14R, and I was in Las Vegas with Kawasaki for the press intro, and some of the people in my group were weathered out. We had really high winds, so I didn't have a chance to ride the bike there. And Kawasaki gave me a unit to test as soon as I got back to California. This bike has a lot of new features this year. It's got a stroked motor, which now displaces 1441cc. The intake has been redesigned. It has a very high flow air filter stock now. Kawasaki says that it gets 60% more air through the intake. The tuning on the bike is different. The bike is basically ported from the factory. Kawasaki really went all out to push the envelope with performance. I put 100 miles or so on the bike so far. I'm going to be riding it a bit more. And I've got to say, this is a fantastic motorcycle. The acceleration, as you might expect, is really phenomenal. It's unlike anything I've ever experienced. And I've ridden all the fast bikes. I rode the old ZX-14. I've ridden the Hayabusa. I've ridden Star motorcycles, incredible new VMAX. This thing is in a class by itself, in my opinion. And the amazing thing is that Kawasaki made this bike so smooth and refined feeling. It's not intimidating to ride. You know, you do have to be an experienced rider, in my opinion. The acceleration is so fierce. You really have to respect the bike. But the throttle response is so smooth. And with the new traction control and selectable ignition maps, you can really set it up so that you're not going to have a problem with wheel spin. You're not going to have a problem with wheelies. But the bike's just viciously fast, but super smooth. I was talking to my photographer here a little bit ago, and I would liken it to a Bentley Continental GT. I saw that car on a show blow away a supercar. It's got some type of quad turbo 16-cylinder motor, but it, like a Bentley should be, it's super refined, and the suspension is really dialed in very nicely this year. The bike travels a little higher in the travel. It's a little bit stiffer, but the first couple of inches are still very plush and feel very good on the highway. The bike's very comfortable. I liked the ergonomics of the old bike, and this bike is essentially identical. It's much more relaxed than a hardcore sport bike. It kind of reminds me of Honda's VFR 1200F, but I find this bike more comfortable than the Honda. This is the special edition here with the limited paint job. This is a metallic green that Kawasaki has only used one other time, and that's on one of their MotoGP bikes. It's got polished wheels and a couple of other features. But we'll do our usual. I'll put my helmet camera on and take you for a ride and tell you a bit more in detail what this machine is like. This road has some high-speed sweepers on it. And the bike really holds its line well, and it transitions from side to side very smoothly. Doesn't really make any abrupt moves. But it's less effort to turn than you would expect given the size and the weight of the bike, and particularly how long the wheelbase is.
even in these slower turns, you can lug the motor well below 4 grand and pull out of them with plenty of power. The motor is really flexible, has a lot of low end, but it's linear at the same time. It's not coming on in gobs when you don't expect it. Kawasaki's been pretty good at fuel injection tuning for quite a while, and this bike displays that also. The fueling is really very, very good. When you crack the throttle open from a closed throttle, it's pretty smooth and predictable response. As I mentioned earlier, the bike is just really comfortable. I mean, you can keep a good pace through roads like this without being all hunched over and uncomfortable the way you would on a sport bike. I guess this is a sport bike, but a race bike with lights, a 600 or a 1000 super bike, a lot less comfortable than this bike. Again, this bike is more VFR-like in my mind. I tested the gas mileage on a relaxed freeway ride, averaging about 75 miles per hour in 6th gear, and I was getting about 44 miles per gallon according to the computer, which isn't too bad considering the amount of power this bike makes. The brakes are really, really good. Thank God, given how fast this bike is. They're Nissan calipers. They don't have a ton of initial bite, but they're very progressive and really strong. The brakes aren't going to get you in trouble on this bike. The throttle will. The bike is deceptively easy to ride. You know, you want to ride normally in the TC1 mode, which gives you full power and, again, only intervenes when it needs to prevent unnecessary wheel spin. Unnecessary is kind of a vague term, but for all intents and purposes, it takes care of your wheel spin when it needs to keep you safe. That's the design principle in any event. TC2 is for wet weather and other low traction conditions. You also have the option of turning the traction control completely off, but personally I don't think I would ever do that during a street ride. It's not like it's going to give you any more power or drive, and the street is not the place for most of us to be leaving darkies when we exit corners. Again, the seating position's more aggressive than a sport tourer, but much less aggressive than a sport bike. And there's a balance to the triangle, and by that the relationship between the seat pegs and bars, just for my body at least, makes me feel comfortable. The suspension this year is definitely stiffer, which, along with the lighter wheels, the wheels are in total a few pounds lighter than last year, seem to be the reasons the bike changes directions much more easily and handles better. The steering geometry is the same, although at the press intro, a Kawasaki representative told me that with the new suspension balance, the effective steering head angle resting on the fork springs is slightly different. What comes to mind when you ride this bike, after the obvious, gee, this is really fast, it's how smooth it is. It's just, the engine is counterbalanced very, very well. The throttle response is very smooth. This year it has a slipper clutch, so you're not hopping the wheel when you downshift into corners. And with it in traction control position 1, you never really have to worry about spinning up the tire. And yet, it's a very sophisticated system, similar to the one on the Kawasaki ZX-14R. So it's pretty much invisible on the street, which is what you want. It's taking care of wheel spin when it needs to, but I never really noticed it.
The Kawasaki Ninja ZX-14R almost feels like an iconic motorcycle. It's big, fast, smooth, comfortable, handles surprisingly well, and even gets impressive gas mileage given its performance. This isn't the bike for everyone, obviously, but if you're looking for a big GT, a bike that has absolutely all the power you need all the time, but is versatile enough to work in the twisties, a commute to work, or even a tour, this might be your bike.